Hello and welcome to What the F Just Happened Today, your essential guide to the daily shock and awe in national politics. I'm Joe Amditis. Let's get to it. It's Wednesday, October 20th, 2021. Welcome to day 274. Senate Republicans blocked a federal voting rights bill for the third time. All 50 Republicans voted against bringing the Freedom to Vote Act to the floor, a compromise version of the For the People Act, which Joe Manchin helped negotiate in an effort to win Republican support. Democrats remain at least 10 votes short of the 60 needed to overcome a filibuster in order to advance the bill without changing the Senate filibuster rule. Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, however, remain reluctant to change the filibuster rules, saying any election overhaul needs bipartisan support. Chuck Schumer, after switching his vote to no at the last moment in order to allow him to request another vote in the future, said if there's anything worthy of the Senate's attention, if there's any issue that merits debate on this floor, it's protecting our democracy from the forces that are trying to unravel it from the inside out. The Freedom to Vote Act would set federal standards for early and mail-in voting, allow for same-day voter registration, and it would make Election Day a national holiday and mandate that voters provide some form of identification before casting their ballot. Mitch McConnell denounced the compromise legislation, saying the same rotten core is all still there. Meanwhile, Joe Manchin reportedly threatened to leave the Democratic Party if Joe Biden and congressional Democrats don't agree to his demand to cut the size of the social infrastructure bill from its current $3.5 trillion to just $1.75 trillion. Manchin said he would declare himself an American independent, but it's unclear whether he'd end up caucusing with the Democrats, allowing them to maintain control of the Senate, or if he would side with Republicans and place the Senate in GOP control. When asked about his potential plan, Manchin replied, "I can't control rumors and it's bullshit. Bullshit spelled with a B-U-L-L, capital B." In D.C., Biden lowered the new tax and spending proposal to between $1.75 and $1.9 trillion, telling Democrats during a private meeting that he believed he could secure a deal at that level. While the number is not finalized, it's far closer to Joe Manchin's $1.5 trillion top line, marking a significant reduction from the $3.5 trillion that Democrats initially pursued. A package up to $1.9 trillion would allow Democrats to accomplish some of their priorities, including at least some expansion of Medicare, the introduction of universal pre-K, and billions of dollars to address climate change. Biden's plan to offer free community college, however, is expected to be cut from the final package, as is the $150 billion program meant to encourage utility companies to switch to renewable energy. The enhanced child tax credit will also likely be extended for just 1 year. Democrats had pushed to keep that in place for up to 5 years. The Biden administration also scaled back its plan for the IRS to crack down on tax cheats after criticism from Republican lawmakers and the banking industry. Under a revised plan, banks would be required to provide data about accounts with more than $10,000 in non-payroll income, rather than the $600 threshold that was initially proposed. The Treasury Department had estimated that its original proposal could raise $700 billion over a decade by cracking down on tax cheats. The proposal is currently included in the multi-trillion-dollar social policy and climate change bill that lawmakers and the White House have been negotiating over for months. Moving on, the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol voted unanimously to recommend charging Stephen Bannon with criminal contempt for defying its subpoena. The full House is expected to vote on the recommendation this week. If passed, a criminal referral would be sent to the Justice Department, which would decide whether or not to press charges against Bannon. A conviction could result in up to a year in jail and a fine of up to $100,000. Bannon has refused to comply with a committee subpoena demanding that he testify and hand over relevant documents about the riot and the effort to delay the electoral vote count, and he refused, citing Trump's attempt to claim executive and other privileges. No criminal charges have ever been filed when an assertion of executive privilege is involved. Meanwhile, GOP Representative Jim Jordan, a potential witness in the House's investigation, struggled to answer questions about his communications with Trump during the January 6th attack, telling a House panel that he doesn't recall the number of times he spoke with Trump that day. Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, also retained a top Republican lawyer to handle the January 6th committee. In New York, the Westchester County District Attorney's Office subpoenaed property tax records related to the Trump National Golf Club in Ossining, New York. Every year since 2015, the Trump Golf Club has appealed its tax bill in court in an effort to cut the tax bill, sometimes by as much as 90%. That process usually requires a company to submit data about its property's financial performance as evidence. The DA appears to be focused in part on whether the Trump Organization misled local officials about the property's value in order to reduce the tax burden. The Trump Organization is also facing a criminal investigation by Manhattan DA Cy Vance, who has already indicted Trump's chief financial officer Alan Weisselberg on charges of felony tax fraud. Moving on, the Trump administration discussed sending 250,000 troops to the U.S. southwest border at the start of the coronavirus pandemic. That's more than half the U.S. Army and a sixth of all American forces. In the spring of 2020, Stephen Miller pressed the Department of Homeland Security to develop a plan for the number of troops it needed to secure the entire 2,000-mile border with Mexico against the virus. Mark Esper, Trump's defense secretary, quashed the idea following a brief, contentious confrontation with Miller in the Oval Office. Had Trump gone through with the deployment, it would have been the largest use of the military inside the United States since the Civil War, and it would dwarf the American presence in both Afghanistan and Iraq at the height of the war. Around the same time, Trump was pressing his top aides to launch military raids against drug cartels inside Mexico. Trump was talked out of the idea after his aides suggested that military raids inside of Mexico would look like the U.S. was committing an act of war against one of its closest allies. And finally, the Washington Post reports that more than 1.7 million migrants along the U.S.-Mexico border were detained by the Border Patrol during the 2021 fiscal year that ended in September. That's the highest level ever recorded. Earlier this year, Biden tapped Kamala Harris to address the root causes of migration from Central America's Northern Triangle nations, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. The latest Customs and Border Protection data, however, indicates that the strategy has had little to no measurable effect.
That's all for now. You can find the links and sources for all of these stories on the main website. And as always, visit whatthefjusthappenedtoday.com for the latest news and headlines. Until next time, I'm Joe Amditas.